Today we are going to talk about a new type of essay question, which is trace and explain. So, what do we mean by trace? Usually, have you played as a child a kind of game which you need to trace different dots together to form a picture, for example, a picture of a dog? This is exactly what we need to do for trace and explain in history questions as well. For example, we divide a long time period into different stages, for example 1945, 1950s, 60s, etc. This process is called periodization. We divide a single time frame into different periods. For each period, we will then give them a feature. And then for these features, we usually use adjectives or noun phrases to describe the individual periods, about how each period is different or special from the other periods. For example, in Hong Kong history, economic history, in the second half of the 20th century, in the 1950s to 1960s, we will usually describe this period of economic development as being focused on labor-intensive industries. This is what we call giving a certain period a feature. So this entire process is what we call trace in this question. Next, we will talk about what we will need to do for explain. So for explain, we need to explain how different periods transit from each other. For example, how period A change or transit to period B. Then we describe or explain how this happened. So for example, from 1940s to 1950s, Hong Kong is focused on entry-port trade after the Second World War. However, in 1950s to 1960s, as we have mentioned before, it turned to focus on labor-intensive industries. So, for explain, we will need to explain in this part about how come Hong Kong changed to focus on labor-intensive industries from 1940s to 1950s entry-port trade. So why suddenly Hong Kong changed to focus on labor-intensive industry? So this is what we need to explain in trace and explain questions. So in short, we need to first periodize the entire time frame and then explain how the different changes between different periods and stages happen. So this is how we trace and explain the general picture of a general time period of history. So the ideal structure for doing this kind of essay question is to first trace. Okay, let me write down trace first, and then explain in between each other. So you do trace and explain, trace and explain, trace and explain. For trace, for example, you first talk about the features of period A and describe period A. And then you proceed to explain how period A eventually changed to period B. And then next, you then go on to describe period B, as in the features of period B. And then once again, you start explaining how period B changes to period C. And then once again, you trace the features of period C, and then try to explain how period C later changed to the next period, and so on. So depending on how many stages you divide the time frame into, you'll have to describe each period and then explain how one period changed to another one by one. This is the general ideal structure of trace and explain questions. So now, let's try. It's your turn to try. But this time we will try with a very easier version, which is to trace and explain your short life so far. So most of you are still in your 15 or 16 years old, so you only need to trace and explain 15 or 16 years of your life so far. For example, for this task, you'll need to go through periodization and divide your lives into different periods. For example, your kindergarten life, your primary school life, and then your secondary school life. So you divide your lives so far into different stages, and then give each stage a feature and describe them. So if you remember, you need to use an adjective or noun phrase to describe the period that you are going to talk about, and then explain how the changes happened between different parts of your life. So let's do a very short task. So I don't expect you to divide your lives into a lot of periods. I expect around 2 to 3. So you need to do 2 or 3 repetitions on the above structure of trace and explain. So of course, in addition to the trace and explain structure, I expect you to write a short introduction and some kind of a conclusion as well, so to make the general essay a full and complete one. This is the end of our lesson video. Thank you.